a question regarding toxic masculinity and being vulnerable. So, where do you find the balance between saying, "Hey, okay, you gotta be strong, you gotta be a man, you gotta, you gotta be ready to be kicked in your ass every now and then," and hey, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to let the people that love you see who you are and how you're feeling and what you're feeling. Where is that balance? I mean, how do you balance those two things?
This was sent in by Tony, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Tony.
I think that's a great question.
It's a great question. The thing that came up for me, are those two things different? Are they fundamentally as different as we think they are? Because in my experience, showing up in a vulnerable way requires real courage, and you will get your ass kicked, right? So, I mean, I know where the question's coming from. I get the question, but I'm wondering, are these things really as different as we think?
Yeah, no, I think that is almost paradoxical about it, is that if you're always in like, look at me, I'm the strong macho man mode, then you're avoiding showing up in a vulnerable way. You're actually avoiding the ass kicking in a way, right? So I think you're right about that. I also think that actually the distinction that Tony made here is really clever, because one way to think of it is that if you're, and this is if we make a distinction, right? If we kind of treat it as a black and white thing, you can think of it as, out in the world versus home base, where when you're out in the world doing your thing, making shit happen and so on, then you are in kind of man up, suck it up, do the hard thing mode, right? But then when you come back to your home base, that is where it is appropriate. That's the right place and time to soften up. And this would be a little bit different maybe in terms of, or I think that the mistake is, or it's like really unfortunate if someone is just constantly in this having to demonstrate, constantly have to demonstrate that I'm a big, strong alpha male, thumping my chest and so on. It's like, even when I'm around friends, even in my relationship, even with my family, I just always, always, always have to be loudly displaying my masculinity in some way, right? That is costly. I would say it's costly behavior, but I do think, there's a point here where, yes, there are situations where it's like the right approach is to have like this hard approach, forward momentum, make shit happen, smash things to bits, rebuild them, this kind of energy, right? But again, like that would be the appropriate thing, is when you're out in the world on your adventure, building your business, doing whatever it is that you do out in the world, that's when it's most appropriate to be in that mode. And then you should have some kind of a home base to come back to, where you can just say, no, look, I'm not going to go super hard and make shit happen right now. Right now, I want to be taken care of, or I just need someone to tell me that everything's okay or whatever,
Yeah.
And that would be like context appropriate,
So that's basically what you're saying, isn't it? Is that it's not like you don't need to get locked into this mode of, I need to be this super masculine alpha dude all the time.
Yeah.
Even when I'm sat at home chilling with my wife or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about being more fluid.
Yeah.
So you're able to relax and you feel accepting of the part of you that wants to be taken care of every now and then. You're not repressing that because you think you've got to be this masculine dude.
And this is the meaning of fragile masculinity. And I think a lot of us are taught masculinity in a way that's very fragile, which is to say that you have to uphold certain like behaviors at all times. If you slip up once, that's the end. That's the end of your masculinity, right? And so this is something I came across on Reddit that I thought was pretty funny, where, someone had like, it was a picture of a sporting event or something, where I guess, something dramatic had happened. And there were two men in the audience who had like, a shocked expression with their hands on their cheeks, kind of. And someone had posted this picture and commented like, oh, men are so feminized nowadays. Look at these men doing these kind of feminine gestures. Okay. This was like their example of the degeneracy of the world. It's like men making the shocked face expression.
That's the example they found.
Yeah.
Was men looking slightly shocked.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? Is like, imagine someone's sense of masculinity is so fragile that's like, if you touch your face, that's it. You're no longer a man. Game over.
How much of yourself do you have to continuously just deny over the course of a day to maintain that persona? That's so exhausting.
Mm-hmm. And so the acknowledgement, so that's with the fluidity, right? So the acknowledgement to say that, yes, I can be, sometimes I'm that guy, sometimes I'm in the gym and I'm hitting the heavy bag and I'm beating people up and whatnot, and sometimes I'm not that. Sometimes I'm not dominating everything that crosses my path, and I can still be a man, and I can still be like a fully valid human being, and so on, right? And I also think that if you don't do that, then you probably compensate in secret, right? You're probably like a secret alcoholic or something like that,
It's got to come out somehow.
It's got to come out somehow, exactly. So that's one way to look at it, as two separate things. But like you said, what also came to my mind is that often it's not that distinguished, and that's where I would think of gentle strength, basically, because you can be, and that's where I also think that the kind of the whole topic of toxic masculinity becomes really important, because even if you're out in the world making shit happen, you're in like masculine energy creation mode, and you're negotiating a deal for your business or something, right? That would be the place to not be in nice guy mode and to not let people walk all over you and so on, right? That makes sense. But even there is like the toxic masculinity way to do it, where you're just constantly thumping the desk and puffing out your chest and just like
there's ridiculous handshakes.
Yeah,
where
you have to do some special handshake.
Look in their eye for exactly this amount of time.
And you have to squeeze harder and all this nonsense, right? It's like, okay, that's the wrong way to do that. And I think that you can, even there, you can be in a mode where you say, look, my job right here is to make sure that I get a good deal. And it's to make sure that I don't let people take advantage of me, and that I stand by my principles and so on. And I understand that maybe the people on the other side of that table and the negotiation are adversarial. They have incentives that make them adversaries to some extent. But you can acknowledge that, and you can stand your ground. And to me, that's the essence of being a strong man in that sense, or just being a strong person in that moment, is the essence of knowing what your goal is, standing your ground, standing by your principles, and maybe being like strategically, tactically clever in accomplishing that. And you can do that while being very calm, like you can do that without being loud or aggressive or anything like that. And that to me is also like, that's where it matters. And whether or not you're making yourself vulnerable there is kind of besides the point. It's like, are you capable? Basically, are you capable of doing your best? And maybe that involves like thumping your chest and doing alpha male stuff, but maybe it doesn't. Doesn't really matter. The outcome is what matters. And what I would say that what I aspire to is to do these things in kind of a gentle strength kind of way, because I don't have to look at this as in a very confrontational way. I don't have to look at the other people in that scenario as like my enemies or anything like that. I can understand you're also just people. You're also just trying to do your best and so on. I can understand all that. I can have full empathy for these people, but I'll still stand my ground, So I kind of look for that kind of balancing act.
Yeah, look for that middle way kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I do also see value in the idea that, depending on the context, there's different states of being that, depending on what your goals are more beneficial. Like when I fought in a cage, for example, it wouldn't have made sense for me to be in there saying, you know what, I just want to be loved as I am.
Yeah.
You know, while I'm about to fight some dude.
Yeah.
I was a lunatic. And
Yeah.
it seems that mode of being was perfect for the situation. But if
Totally,
I'd behaved in that way in literally any other context, I'd be locked up and whatnot. So it's context dependent.
Yeah, and that fluidity of behavior, I think that's the real mark of strength here. Like, and that even, you know, regardless of whether we're talking about masculinity or anything else, it's like, to me, that is a pretty interesting power unlock that I'm still working on. Like, I'd love to be better able to do that. It's like this kind of mode switching, you know, to be able to deliberately switch into what I think is the best mode to be in a situation, instead of, because usually we're just carried away by it, right? We change states, our modes of being, kind of unconsciously. We kind of get emotionally carried away, and often we regret it afterwards, right? It's like, and you wish you could have been in a different mode. To me, that's like, I suspect that that's a super powerful unlock if you can have, the more control you can have over what mode you're in. Yeah,
precisely. I think without going too far down this rabbit hole, there was a simple tip, like a state switching tip. I think I mentioned to you like a year ago, whereas it's like the second self switch, basically. So you, like, the prerequisite for this exercise is that you write down exactly how you would behave in the world, like who you would be if you had there was no impediment. You just were already showing up as the person. And then you get a box of Tic Tacs.
Oh, yeah.
And then whenever you're in a situation where you're like, hang on a minute, it'd be really cool if I could be that person, especially right now. And you just save these Tic Tacs, you label them, whatever, and you just pop one. And you literally, you build up this association that when you pop one of these, it's like the liquid that goes into Bane kind of thing, you know, you press test. It's the same deal. And the more you do this, you build up the association. You don't use the Tic Tac for anything else if you can control it. But like, pop one, it's like, shit, okay, I'm this person now. It's one of those things that seems like it won't work, but the way the brain associates with different actions and rituals and stuff and produces different outcomes is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's something I want to explore, this kind of thing, because it's also on one of the community calls, this came up, like even just the idea of like switching costumes, you know, where it could even be something like, I don't know, glasses on, glasses off, or something like that, you know, where you deliberately build an association with things like that, you know. I think that could be really powerful, but it's something I need to explore more myself.
Yeah. And there's one last thing I want to say about the whole masculinity thing. So I was burdened by this question when I was younger. And there was a kind of a role model for a while who really helped me sort of see this in a new way, because I was struggling, because I'm quite an emotionally sensitive person, and no other men really around me was modeling kind of that behavior in a way that was acceptable. It's like, no, you need to repress that, basically. Until I saw an interview with Terry Crews. Terry Crews is fucking jacked, massive, like athletic dude. And but in his movies, he often dances in a really feminine kind of way, and often shows up in some of his roles, like in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for example, is in quite an effeminate sort of dude. And it's part of the comedy of him, because to look at him, I think he was an extra in American History X as a convict in the background, and he looked like he'd rip your head off. But yeah, in his roles, he often speaks quite effeminately. And in this interview, he was talking about how he, like, through his own personal journey, he's learned to embrace his feminine aspects, and he saw it as an extremely life-affirming and positive thing for his personality. And his own enjoyment of himself, the way he described it. I enjoy myself, like actually enjoy who I am a lot more when I don't look at these parts of me as something to be gotten rid of or ashamed of. But the fact that I do have this really strong feminine part of me that allows me to play these roles and enjoy them, and it's not a negative thing. And when I saw him do that, because he had all the street cred, you know, he was jacked and stuff, and he was successful and whatnot. So I was like, damn, if a successful guy like that can embrace both sides of him, then I surely can. Yeah. So that kind of really helped me with that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's very, and he is great. Like it makes for such good comedy as well.
It's
just
fantastic.
The contrast between, yeah, he just looks so intimidating by default.
And then he just dances in a really sort of like flamboyant way and you don't expect it.
That's cool.
It's always a riot.